Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of the Big Home Ed Conversations. You're here as always with myself, Kelly Rigg. I'm a home ed mum of two and founder of Off-Roading Motherhood. I'm a qualified mindset coach and I have a passion for working with home educating parents and neurodivergent families as well as they kind of navigate the transition away from mainstream and into home education. I'm joined as always by my really good friend Ashley Venerio. She's a fellow home ed mum of three and an ex-primary teacher. We met a few short years ago and honestly got on like a house on fire and essentially found ourselves sitting around her coffee table, usually the kids playing crazy around us, having the most intense conversations about all of the stuff that really mattered to us as alternative educators, shifting mindsets, supporting each other with the challenges around behaviours, day-to-day struggles, figuring out what kind of philosophies to follow, all of that stuff. And we were so sick of trying to find helpful information online and seeing that most podcasts and places you could find information were just so focused on the myths. And we thought, honestly, we need to move past this. We want to talk about the stuff that really matters to us as alternative educators, and essentially started the Big Home Ed Conversations as a hobby. In the past 18 months, we have seen this podcast go from a fun little thing, getting 10 of our friends and family listening, to many, many, many hundreds of you listening. And it is just the most incredible thing to see so many of you also agreeing that these conversations are important. And the comments we get are that it offers you clarity, conviction, confidence, and has literally encouraged many, many people who've reached out to me to actually start home educating their children, which is just such an incredible thing to know that we are helping you to do that and to feel confident in doing so. If you are brand new to home education and finding this podcast, then I really want to let you know that over the summer, I am going to be doing a series of kind of getting your head straight to home ed. We're going to be talking about essentially the basics. We're going to do a bit on the basics, and we're going to do a little bit about that initial kind of getting over those initial fears and sort of struggles that you tend to have in those early months. And we're just going to really just plow through them in some little short, tidy episodes to help you kind of work your way through those feelings. So if you are brand new and you do need a little bit of that early kind of hand-holding, then please do listen out for those episodes. Obviously, feel free to dig into all the other ones as well. They'll all be relevant to you, even if you're brand new, even if you've been doing it for 20 years. Hopefully, you'll be finding something useful in these. But ultimately, we wanted to let you know that you're going to have some extra support over the summer, especially as so many people do tend to deregister as they come to the end of a school year. So we thought we'd make sure we had that in place for you. Now, with no further ado, this week we are talking about breaking free from this sit-down culture. So much of education is centred around the concept of children being in a classroom, sat at a desk, listening to a teacher, then doing active written work, etc. Now, I know that in schools, this is not the entirety of what their day will look like. They're going to be doing drama and movement and music and various other activities. And so they are going to be integrating movement into their education. But I actually really feel like we need to take a step further and remember that all subjects can benefit from movement, and that actually reading is best done on the move. Spotting shapes and doing maths is best done on the move. That so many games and activities and physical movements and all sorts of different stuff is super important to helping our kids to integrate their learning into like a wider lifestyle as well. And so we're going to talk about that a bit today, and also kind of how important it is for us as parents to be meeting our needs and supporting us as well as we're kind of dealing with our day-to-day, and remembering that we are allowed to move. We are allowed to prioritise our needs in education as well. If we're feeling bored, we're feeling stuck, chances are they are too. So let's try and shake it up and actually see how we can integrate more movement into our day-to-day life. Now, gratitude-wise, I really found myself struggling. We sat here for a good solid 5 minutes, we were just staring at the ceiling being like, come on, just something, anything, something small. You've got so much to be grateful for. Stop being so grumpy. I am in the low point of my cycle. I am a woman. We have moments when we don't feel very grateful for the life we lead. And I have felt incredibly anxious this past week. My brain has been going a million miles a minute. So many different things that I'm trying to get myself organized and get my thoughts in straight order so that I can actually do something with some of the things that need doing. I really get stressed out sometimes when my brain has got so many things it wants to do, that it gets so overwhelmed that it can't do any of them anymore. It's good old ADHD. So I actually sat down yesterday. I found myself thinking, I ran an event once for a business, and in 6 months, I built it from the ground up. I built the full infrastructure. I raised £250,000. I recruited 500 kids to come and take part. Not literally single-handedly, but pretty close. I had 2 volunteer interns working with me, and we made the whole thing happen. It was an absolute slog. And ultimately, I did all of that with a spreadsheet. I found myself thinking, do you know what? I'm just going to start treating my life like a massive, great project. I'm just going to stick every single thing that I can think of into, it's essentially called a Gantt chart. Those of you who've done any kind of event planning or even sales and all sorts of stuff, you may have come across these in the past, but it's a really simple system. So I'm really grateful for the little bit of work experience that I've had, well, a lot of work experience that I've had, but the work experience that I had specifically in that window that reminded me that I have actually got the capability to do incredible feats if given the right kind of structure and organization to do it in. And actually that helped me to keep sane. That helped me to stop having to worry that I'd remembered to do everything that needed to be done, and allowed me to prioritize things accordingly. So I had literally spent my evening yesterday plugging my entire life into a massive spreadsheet, which I'm sure this system will only last me as long as it lasts until I feel a bit calmer again. But hopefully it will just help me to get through this particularly busy phase and start to feel a bit more settled. So there you go. There's me and my geeky spreadsheet gratitude. We'll take that. That's a good option. Go on, Ashley. Tell us yours.
Mine is just aside from the extreme heat of this trip here in Italy and just being thankful and grateful for shade, parking a car in the shade. I have definitely just been enjoying the fruits and vegetables here. It absolutely changes a salad when your onions taste like onions and your cucumbers actually have a taste and your tomatoes have flavor. All of these things I forget, and then when I get back here I'm like, "Oh yeah," because there are so many local fruit stands where they're really bringing these things up from southern Italy, from Sicily, and the truck is coming twice a week or whatever it is. And I had my local stand that I went to for years here. And in fact, I make it a point to go stop in to the woman who owns it because that's how close we were. That, she's seen my kids grow up. So that's been really great. And I've just been appreciative of hopefully the nourishment that we're getting from that. And last Friday, I was in Bergamo for an event that my husband's work had. And when I got there, we went to lunch, just the two of us at this agriturismo. And in Italy, they're all over. So you can really just like search for that in Google Maps. And we just found the closest one to where we were going or to where we were staying. And what's great about these places is they are basically little farms and they grow and raise the animals right there. And that's essentially what you're eating. And so a simple plate of pasta with just tomatoes and basil is so good. And they have their own, meats and cheeses and all these dishes that are just absolutely delicious. And you really taste the flavor. It's so different than having bought something in the grocery store that comes from a country that you don't live in, and or then having to prepare it, and by the time you eat it, the fruit's traveled further than you ever have in your life, and yeah. So it's just really lovely to be able to eat fresh, nutritious food. That farm to table experience happens a lot here in Italy. It's so probably underappreciated, I want to say. So if you do go to Italy, I highly recommend finding the agriturismos near you. They're so good.
I was going to say, I think that sort of 0 miles eating experience just sounds like an absolute dream, doesn't it? Just the flavour that must be in those foods. And I think definitely one of the biggest problems in the UK with our agriculture, obviously so much is being imported anyway, but even the stuff that's grown here so often is being grown in farms that have been so overused for one specific crop for such a long time that actually they don't even taste that good anymore. And it's so true, like that, like a salad might be something we all want to eat a bit more often if it was that flavorful and full of real like delicious nutrients. We can taste how good it is. And I think our bodies know what they really want too, right? I've been really trying to be a bit more conscious of listening to mine recently and reaching for stuff which is going to really nourish me and support me and make me feel really good. I've been feeling a little bit dizzy and yuck and horrible in this heat, and I found myself thinking I really need to take better care of me. So I think it's really fascinating, kind of just that thinking about the nutrients in food and actually caring about how important that is. But I think it's not that we've forgotten. We do know how important food is in this country. Everyone seems to care so very much about being healthy and taking care of our bodies, but so much of it is so processed and taken away from its roots. That is such a nice thing to get to experience that. So yeah, I'll definitely have to look out for something like that when I get to Italy next. I think the Mediterranean is really good for that in general, isn't it? That constant, really good nutrients, really good local food. They tend to really value what they grow, which is just so special.
Yeah, and they all have these dishes that they're known for. So it's so funny because I'll be at a restaurant and I'm like, oh, I'm going to order this. And my husband's like, no, that's not what you get in this region. You get this. And like we were eating over, uh, having lunch the next day on our way home. And he's like, no, you have to get the polenta here because that's what they're known for. Well, I don't want polenta when it's 40 degrees out. Thank you very much. So I will have something else. But next time I'll get the polenta.
That must be so nice as well to have his wisdom and like ideas of the kinds of foods that are really like what the areas are famous for, and especially for your kids as well, getting to experience that as well is so special. But really understanding the point of sort of local foods and why they're local and how they've become so popular there, and because they grow well there and all that sort of stuff. It's so important. I think if we're trying to actually make sure our planet actually gets to stay rooted to what it should be. Yeah, very, very exciting. I'm very jealous. So getting into this week's topic. So we're trying to kind of get along this kind of concept of breaking free of the sit down culture. Now, I think as home educators, we're preaching to the converted. We're certainly not encouraging you to think, oh, well, I have to do this much more, because I'm sure that you are already moving 20,000 times more than the average school child gets to move on a weekly basis, at least within the school walls. And ultimately, as home educators, we do really value our time spent outside. I mean, if you just look at the top level basics, the reasons why I value movement for my kids, one is because it helps to keep us fit and well. It keeps our flexibility up. It keeps our ability to focus. It helps us to feel more kind of vital in our lives if we're moving regularly and we're feeling like we're actually engaging all the parts of our body. Like every single bit of us matters, not just our brains. I also really value it for the concept of regulation. So obviously I am dealing with neurodivergent children. If they were asked to sit still and not meet their physical body needs, then actually that dysregulation of their nervous system causes meltdowns and shutdowns, and them to get really super overstimulated or not to be able to enjoy the activities that we're trying to do. So I have got to constantly keep in mind making sure they're able to meet all the various different needs that they have got. So it's super important for them to obviously move their bodies and to make sure that they're able to meet those needs. But I also have found there have been so many moments when I've been trying to cover something off with them and ask them to come and sit and focus. And they found that so hard to actually sustain listening and to participate in the conversation if I'm making them sit still. And so we found that literally if I go downstairs and use we've got these big French doors, if I get some chalk pens and use that as kind of like a board to draw on, whilst they're messing about on the swing, we've got like a sensory swing thing and a wobble board, I will actually have them engaged in a conversation that's a bit more class-like. This is the only time I've ever done that. It's like a couple of times when it's been fun to actually draw it out whilst we've been talking about it. They will actually use that as a really great opportunity to move their bodies. They'll listen, they'll answer the questions, etc. If I ask my son maths questions whilst he's breakdancing on the kitchen floor, he will answer them like that, straight away, no hesitation. It just comes straight to his head. If I ask him to sit and focus, he's spending so much energy making himself sit and focus that he actually finds it pretty hard to answer the questions. So I know that from his perspective, he actually learns on the go like 10,000 times easier than he does if I try and force him to sit still. Now, I think we all know in schools why it's so important for teachers to wrangle 30 children and get them to sit down and be quiet. Like, I can understand, like, I could not have 30 of my kids breakdancing, chattering, flailing around, getting up and down off their chairs, wandering around the classroom and stay sane, just trying to explain a simple concept so that they can all go off and do whatever activity we're about to do next. Like 100%, there is a time and a place for you need to stop and sit and listen. But I think the problem is with where we've obviously contained children in this space, we've given them a single adult who's supposed to be, or maybe if they're lucky, them one TA to help them to wrangle this group of kids. It's just impossible to maintain that level of freedom and needs meeting that we could actually achieve in a home educating environment. So I appreciate this is a privilege of one-to-one education, alternative provisions, more outdoor education, forest schools, etc. Like this is a concept that works a lot better when you haven't got one or two adults trying to wrangle a massive group of kids. But I do think there is still a very important conversation to be had here about how detrimental that actually can be to our children's learning. So obviously you've been a teacher. I can imagine it was really hard to like obviously help them to meet needs and to make sure they're sort of staying focused, but also to make sure that you're getting through the curriculum that you've got to try and cover.
It's very challenging. I think it's what separates like good experienced teachers from those who kind of tend to be more aggressively disciplinarian and just have like that, when you had those grumpy teachers like growing up, like I feel like that's the difference. They struggle to keep that flow. And then if you think about those wonderful teachers that you had growing up, they probably were more easygoing and they let the conversations meander a little bit before bringing it back. They let the one kid do jumping jacks in the back of the classroom. Uh, those were the teachers that stuck with you, and you probably didn't even realize why. Um, and obviously, all this varies by grade and all of that, the age of the child. But I think that it is one of those things where you are desperately trying to work towards this end goal of end of the year, the children have completed everything that you're supposed to have completed for that curriculum. And you obviously don't have the luxury that home educators do of catering to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children. And that's very different than a classroom and the management style that's required for that. So yeah, it's always going to look different in a classroom, but there are teachers who are able to find ways to engage the students. I mean, if you think about when you were in school, were you able to get up and write on the chalkboard? And you loved writing on the chalkboard, right? That everyone wanted to be that kid. Why was that? Why did that teacher decide to let the class kick off by each row of students? So maybe you had 5 rows in that classroom. One student from each row would write a homework problem on the board, and you then would compare your homework to them. Did they get it right? Yeah, that's absolutely one way to do it, but it also lets movement. It lets those children who aren't writing on the chalkboard have the ability to kind of move around a little bit in their desk and talk to their friend, compare their paper, right? So there are all these different things that you probably never even realized were letting you exercise movement at that moment, but it definitely made you like that class more, right? And so that's something to kind of be mindful of. It's happening. It's just not all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, I think some subjects we tend to pigeonhole into movement-based subjects too, right? So like science experiments and getting outside for PE and maybe kind of art as well. Like I know I did like when we had like painting or sometimes our teacher would send us out with buckets of water and paintbrushes. We'd go paint the pavement outside or whatever it is that we were doing. Like obviously younger years, this is more than anything, but you kind of associate certain subjects with movement more easily than others. And I think we do tend to almost pigeonhole, for example, reading and writing to desk work. We seem to think that is the only place that a child can be practicing these skills. And as an home educator, as somebody who's thought about this a lot and has practiced various different rules and ideas around this, that actually I've found that my children do a heck of a lot more reading if we're just reading the names of different businesses off the side of trucks or reading menus at a restaurant, or maybe it's we're walking around somewhere historic and they're reading all the big posters and signs and things and little chunks of text that are on those sorts of things, or whatever it might be. And writing wise, same again, like it might be writing messages to each other in the sand at the beach, or it could be drawing in the sand, or it could be drawing in the mud or whatever. Like there's so many different moments where we can use those same skills or work on the fine motor skills or work on like skills that lead into those, so in leading into writing, such as drawing or playing with physical things like playing with sand and mud and touching stuff and feeling stuff and like lifting things and working on the strength of our fingers, etc. All of those things lead into those skills later. And and actually allow for a lot less desk time, because actually when you do sit down to try and actually do some proper sit down practice, see anything, the fine motor skills and stuff have been developed in many other ways. And I think it's so much of that is critical for development, and is definitely encouraged in younger years. But I feel like it drops away quite quickly once a pencil's in their hand and a piece of paper's on their desk. And I think it, like, for want of a better word, sometimes it can feel easier. Like, I get this sensation, this is being really honest here. Sometimes I just want to print off a worksheet and sit down and just do some addition. I don't want to mess
Yeah.
about. I don't want to go and get
Yeah.
loads of resources out. I don't want to spend ages playing with counters and just letting them get there naturally all on their own. Sometimes I just want to get a piece of written work done, stick it in the folder, move on. And like, I
Yep.
know I'm not alone in this. Like, this is 100% a normal sensation to get. Like, when we're busy, maybe we've not got a lot of time, maybe we haven't done a lot of written work lately, maybe we're feeling a little bit nervous about what if anybody ever did need to see any evidence of what we're doing. Whatever it might be, there's loads of different reasons why we might kind of get this urge to make them sit down and do something. And actually, I find that in those moments, I get so much pushback and struggle that I then get quite frustrated and irritated with them. But like, you hardly ever have to do this. I would have had to do this every single day at school. Like, there's absolutely no way that I would have gotten away with just being, I don't want to, having a wobbly and walking away. And all these conversations kind of come around and around, and we do find ourselves getting irritable with this sometimes. And actually, it's in those moments that, obviously, from my own, I guess, like, my own limiting beliefs, my own struggles, my own like lingering trauma from being forced to do it myself, I have to then have a really serious chat with myself and be like, okay, I hear that you're getting annoyed. Like, it's okay that you're feeling frustrated by this, but let's actually think about another way that we could make this work. And sometimes that's me letting them move around and just getting them to come and quickly read the sum and then carry on doing what they were doing and shout the answer to me when they figured it out, and then I write it down or whatever. And I just make a note at the bottom saying, like, they read out the sum and told me the answer, I did the writing. It's just so that I've got the evidence that they did actually do the maths themselves. They just didn't want to sit and actually do the worksheet right now. So then I've got something to put away. Or maybe it's my daughter, for example, works a lot better if I give her a load of pencils or some other random objects, and we use those to obviously count out the answer to. And she's only 5, so to totally what you should be doing anyway, really, is kind of giving them a physical thing to work with to help them to visualize what it looks like, that number, etc. But when it comes to movement and maths, I think we don't often put those two together, or we put movement and reading and writing, we don't always put those two together. But actually, there are lots of ways of including movement in those subjects. Playing hopscotch, jumping across the room on a letter, like, there's so many different things that you can be doing that do take a little bit more creativity, but actually ultimately help to build and really embed learning as well. So I don't know if yours find that certain subjects they find really difficult to remember or retain, but actually if you do it as a funny rhyme, or you do it as an exercisey game, then actually suddenly they're grasping it really fast. It's shocking sometimes how that works.
I think I'm going to forget the statistic here, but when you talk about learning something, you have to have exposure to it like 100 times, 200 times, something like that. But when you learn through play, you learn it in 5 exposures, like a dramatic difference. And I can't remember if those are the exact numbers. I'm going off my memory here, but it is staggeringly different like that. And so when you think about how fast your kid learns new things on video games, or if they're playing a card game, or if they're just outside playing a game that they've created with other friends, children learn way more through play. And so the more that you can incorporate that into whatever you're teaching, the better off you'll be, the more likely they are to retain it. And that absolutely makes sense, right? I mean, we can think of just watching our children, we observe that. So for mine, it's definitely that way. We also like to just not have regulations around, like, you can only use a pencil, or you can only use a pen, or you can only use this paper. Or I use a lot of these manipulatives made by a company called Jack and Link, which is a US company. And I think if you even tried to go to their website here, it doesn't work. It's only accessible through the US, but you can follow her Instagram and see what I'm talking about. I basically like order them, ship them to my mom, and then hoard them back here, so that we can use them. And they're basically these little dry erase manipulatives in various different shapes, that just make it fun. So if we're, talking about writing a letter, I might have the manipulatives that are for a letter and sticking them in a mailbox. Like, check out their Instagram. It'll make way more sense what I'm saying. But she's just brilliant what she's doing. It's a family run company, husband and wife, and they kind of created it out of a need for their own children. But what I think you can take away from that is you can do that with everything around your house. It doesn't have to be their specific things that you're purchasing. So you can find ways to make things more engaging. And yes, like you said, it does take a lot more work, but I think that it does allow for that kind of movement and creativity to come into like something that might otherwise be very boring, like adjectives, right? So, maybe you're even just taking a piece of paper and you're drawing the center of a flower and you have, 5 petals around it. And in the middle is the word dog, and your kid is learning adjectives. So you say, okay, fill each petal in with an adjective about a dog. What describes a dog? What's something? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? Right. And you can kind of do that to make it a little bit more fun. And obviously, the more you do this, the better you'll be about pulling these things out of thin air, like I just did, right? So, you could just, I practice makes progress, right? So, all of that is so really good. But I think a lot of this, and kind of what you're talking about too, isn't even just movement, but it's also just like that mental well-being, right? And I love going back to Charlotte Mason for this because I think she just, gosh, and 150 years ago, right? She really knew what she was talking about, and I don't know why we don't have this more prominent in all schools. The home education community, home educators just rely so much on a lot of what she speaks, and I know there are schools that do this very, very well. But it's ridiculous to me that it's still considered alternative and not like the way. But
Yeah.
anyway, she talked about like regulation and mental well-being, not just for the child, but for the parent in the case of home education. But that mental well-being component is really fostered and like maintained by alternating focus with movement and rest. And that those two together created this like positive atmosphere. So like any time that you were going to have like a mental effort, you would need to balance that with what she called restful pursuits. So that could just be quiet reflection. It could be doing chores around the house. It could be going for a nature walk. And that those types of components really complement each other. And all of that comes back to basically what she talked about in terms of like a daily rhythm versus like a strict schedule. So the rhythm would be first we have breakfast, then we do our chores, then we get dressed, then we go for a walk. Whereas like a schedule would be breakfast is from 7 to 7:15. The walk is from 7:15 to 7:45. We feed the dog at 7:45, right? So just a very rigid, something that you then feel anxiety over if you're not meeting that. Or maybe you're on a nature walk and you're really enjoying it and you decide to go for another loop, right? But if you're sticking to a strict schedule, you can't do that. So anyway, the like regulation component she felt was really built by daily habits and that rhythm. And then parents modeling that themselves. And what I find super hard about this is I was like a fly by the seat of your pants person. There was definitely a rhythm to my day, work, gym, lunch, whatever. But I never really, if, someone called, hey, do you want to go to this? I'm like, yep, I'm there. Let's do that.
Yeah. It always
I'll
just
go to the
changes on
gym
the dime,
tomorrow.
doesn't it?
Yeah. And then you have kids and you're like, wait, naps? I can't be out of the house for naps. Like, and yeah, it just
Yeah.
changes everything. And so this was a struggle for me. And I hate when the masses are right. But it's true. Like my kids did do better if I was sticking to their nap schedules and if they're eating at the same time every day or relatively, right? And that little change, like if I was like, oh yeah, stay up and watch that show for an extra hour. And I know some children can do this. Mine cannot. Perfect example. The other night we met friends because obviously we used to live here in Italy. My kids were having a great time. We started dinner at 7. We were still there at 10. My oldest, who's 11, is coming over. Mommy, can we please go to bed?
No,
Okay.
bless.
What 11-year-old says that to you? Can we please go home and go to bed? And then we went home And it was a disaster. It was absolute disaster. My 5-year-old was a hot mess. My 8-year-old was screaming that she hated me. She didn't want to be touched. How could I then dare leave her and not give her a kiss? Get back here. I mean, that, ebb
Yeah,
and
really
flow.
super emotional tiredness. Yeah, my
Oh
son gets like
man,
that. Yeah.
so dysregulated. It was a disaster. I think we were there till nearly midnight trying to get them to fall asleep because my husband and I are actually sleeping at my sister-in-law's, lives down the street, and my kids are staying at my in-laws. And so,
Awesome.
yeah, so this is just, I'm like, I love these reminders.
Uh,
No, your kids cannot fly by the seat of their pants. They need these
yeah.
rhythms. They need these habits. They need their schedule.
And I think also like integrating a bit of movement, like so saying, for example, like that actually your kids tend to focus better if they've already had a chance to be outside today. Then maybe it's a case that actually
100%.
like get out for that walk really early, like go out and move some bodies,
Yes.
get some wiggles out. And then maybe by 9 o'clock they'll be able to sit down and actually do some stuff with you for a little while. Or like
Yes.
I definitely find you've got to get the balance right. And I was literally working with a client on this a couple of months ago where she was kind of saying, I'm so stressed. I've got so much work to do. And I've got like these coaching calls. So I have to go and do my coaching calls. He's got to occupy himself doing whatever I've set for him to do. Then I come out and I need to sit down with him, go through what he's done, take him, like get through the next chunk of work that he needs my help with. And then I've got to get back on another call. And it's just a bit like back and forth at the minute. And I said, okay, so how regulated are you feeling? Like you're coming off like whatever it is that you're doing, what do you need? And she goes, well, to eat, to have a drink. I need to move my body. I'm feeling really restless. There's loads of housework that needs doing that I'm neglecting. This and the other. And okay. I said, and he's also probably sat, played on a screen or messed about, like done something quietly by himself for a little while. I said, so he's also probably in need of a drink, maybe something, a snack. Maybe he needs to get out and move his body too. And I was like, so maybe that's not the window to be trying to force some sit down work right now. Like maybe that's just not going to work for you guys just whilst you're in this really busy week where you've just got a lot going on. um what else could you do? Like how else could you use that hour that actually would allow you both to be more productive and calmer and get through it? Like is 5 minutes of proper reading before you jump back on that call better than an hour of struggle whilst you're both getting angry with each other because both of you have got needs to meet and you're both feeling resentful? That actually it doesn't work. Like, and actually we can spend so much of our time fighting back against these things, and ultimately if we just put some effort into regulating first, and I think this is sometimes we have to regulate after for sure, but if we can do our best to regulate first, then it actually means that the difficult bits, the bits that do require more focus or attention or whatever, come a lot easier. Like I know, for example, if I sit straight down at my desk to do some work in the morning and I haven't had a drink, something to eat, and a chance to wake up a bit more gently, maybe gone outside for just a few minutes and just had some fresh air on my face, whatever, then I know that I'm not going to be as productive as I would be if I'd just done a few of those things first. So yeah, so I think it's really scary, isn't it? Sometimes you can see how dysregulation can obviously then just make working together so impossible.
And that's the thing. It does come down to like recognizing those needs for both you and for your child, and then being able to spot it and hopefully react or build it into your routine. And this is another great example. I'm sure everyone in the UK is experiencing this right now too. With this heat, we are not getting outside. Sunday was so hot here that we literally spent the day inside doing puzzles, card games, and playing with like, little figurines and stuff, like the Playmobil and stuff like that. And then in the evening, my kids were going out of their mind, like screaming, not screaming angry, but like the volume of their excitement was just off the charts. And obviously, in the evenings here, there are so many mosquitoes. So it's like the worst time to be outside at that dusk hour because you just get eaten alive. But I was like, I don't care. We're going to just spray the awful bug spray all over us and go outside because otherwise, I don't know what we're going to do. Like they were climbing on the furniture. And it's just like this is because we've been inside all day because
Yeah.
my kids have got to get outside all day, especially my middle. She has got to be able to stretch her legs
Mm-hmm.
and like for more than 4 seconds. So the dog didn't want to go for a walk, like all of these things that day because it was so, 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 so hot. Um, but yeah, and it wasn't until I was like, okay, everyone outside, like outside, it's not super cool, but the sun is hidden a bit. Let's go because otherwise you're not going to go to sleep.
No. And I think it's so, like, aside from the self-regulation as well, I think the other thing that keeps coming back into my head as we're talking is how actually using lots of different types of stimuli helps us to retain information. So this is the other thing, kind of like sort of sidestepping this a little bit and talking about another element of this. If you think about kind of, if you just read a book and you don't talk to anybody about it, you don't write anything down, you don't research it further, you don't go on to watch a documentary, you don't do anything else, you just read a book about a subject just for fun, you just enjoy it, you've read it, you move on. Some of that information will stick for sure. But actually, if you never do anything else with that, there's a good chance that that information is going to disappear. Now, this comes back around to relevance in learning as well, and how actually a lot of the time when our brains retain the information that matters to us. So if we can then integrate that somehow and have them see it actually matter in a number of different ways, then those concepts tend to stick around. So, like, for example, if you did read something with your kids and they've piqued an interest and they're interested in learning more about it, then physically going and visiting somewhere, running around the walls of a castle or around a garden or around a place that's got something to do with that subject, or maybe it's going to a garden and instead of just wandering around the garden, you stop, you sniff, you smell, you touch, you like play with the different leaves, you talk about the different um, types of leaves you see, the different types of petals, the different structures of flower. You take some photos, you collect some to take home and dry later. You use one of those fun apps where it actually like identifies them and tells you exactly what they are. You maybe take some pens and paper and you draw one, or you whatever, right? And I know that all this can sound like really, like, my kids sometimes really resist kind of going into great depth like this, but it doesn't have to be forever. Like, it can literally just be for 30 seconds. It doesn't even need to be a lot, but it is just that little moments, little kind of mindful moments, I guess. This is mindfulness essentially, is actually taking the time to really truly look at something, feel it, touch it, smell it. The more elements of our senses that we involve in every single learning example and opportunity, the more hope there is for them actually to retain that information and to keep it. And I know for me that if I go somewhere and I chat to someone about something and then I read something really interesting that's a fact, and then I tell three other people that fact, and then I like find myself Googling it and watching a video about it because I'm so fascinated by it, chances are that information is going to stick around for a while. Like, for example, right now I'm hilariously fascinated by I think it's agate. It's agate. It's a type of
Oh,
rock. So like as like things fossilize, you get these nodules in rocks where loads of different minerals have seeped into it in different layers, and so they create these incredible layered rocks inside. So these guys cut them open. It's just amazing, like easy watching on Instagram, but it's fascinated me, and it's actually set me off down like, how do these form? What kinds of minerals are those? Like, what kind of situation has to happen to the rock for that to happen? Like, all of these questions start to fill up in your head, and instead of like putting them down, I've obviously then found myself wanting to look into it more. And I now just want to get out to the like a riverbed with the kids and see if there's somewhere local to us where we might be able to hunt for some of these and try and crack them open or whatever. Like, just the most incredible opportunities. And I think we just have to kind of take the lead of what is piquing our curiosity in whatever physical form that is. And that could be that they just want to run up and climb a hill to see a view, or they want to climb a particular tree, or as they're climbing that tree, they're noticing a fungus on it and an insect and the type of bark it is and how tricky it is to get down because it's
yeah.
not a particularly easy to climb tree. And why is that? Like, is it because of the structure of the tree and the way it grows, or like how separated out the branches are, or whatever, right? Like, there's so much information out there that is found out simply through experience. And I guess really trying to break free of this kind of culture of learning is done when sitting down. It frustrates me so much when you kind of, I've had conversations with people, they've said to me, don't you want them to be able to just sit down and just do a job one day though? And I was like, well, I'm sure they will be able to just sit down and do a job one day if that is what is being called of them. However, I do actually hope that they will be conscious that they function better in movement and maybe take on a kind of job that allows them plenty of movement in their day and isn't just sitting at a desk. So no, if that doesn't suit them, I would rather they pick something that would make them feel more human, more them, like more engaged, enjoying it. That no, actually, I'm not particularly bothered about that as a goal. It's not important for me.
Well, it's not the goal, it's the characteristic of the work, right? So like if they're really interested in law and they want to become a lawyer, then obviously that's a job that requires a ton of studying, a ton of work at a computer. But if that is what they feel called to do, then they'll be engaged in the work, and thus sitting at the desk won't be an issue.
No,
Whereas
exactly.
like training them to sit at a desk isn't really the goal, because
No.
there's no job where you just sit at a desk. You're doing something, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think you're right. And if your kids naturally tend to move towards a more physical job, like that's what gives them satisfaction, then they just won't even choose that. So it won't even matter. Right.
No.
But I think you're right. I think people are like, oh no, we need to condition them to sit at a desk. No, you need to condition them to be interested in something and to follow their true passion and drive to be happy and fulfilled. And that will naturally then either lead them to sitting at a desk or
Yeah.
out in the world
Yeah.
walking around. I don't know. But like, right. So it just seems like the priority isn't right in that case when people say that. I don't know. And of course you're
No.
just like, oh, okay, whatever, because you're not going to dive into that conversation with them in the line at the grocery store. But it's one of those things we hear, right? It's one of those myths that we
Yeah.
keep getting asked. Well, what if they need to sit at a desk? Well, I'm sure they'll be just fine.
And I think as well, like we're talking in this situation where like it's important to condition them to cope in this situation, to remember they're one of a crowd, to sit and be quiet, to sit at a desk, to listen to authority, to do as they're told, to follow instructions. Like these are all things that we value quite highly in education. But as adults, we want people who are capable of thinking for themselves, who are capable of taking the bull by the horns and being proactive, who are
Yeah.
good team players, are coming up with creative ideas, solving problems. Like we almost want the opposite. And I honestly find that really odd, really, really odd.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think we're asking for this conditioning. We're asking this of human children who are typically not really geared up for that in general, and it's actually quite difficult for them and does cause them a lot of strain. And most children have periods of time where they need to re-regulate outside of school. They need to go and move their bodies and have fun and play with their friends, just really get that runny energy out. And we're asking that of them. And I don't really know how anyone could listen to this conversation and think that anything that we're saying is not basically highlighting that as human beings, we naturally need these things. So why is it that we seem to be so intent? And I think this is where we have to really, again, it's coming back around to questioning social constructs and social expectations and the reasons why we're worried about this stuff, because ultimately this is really reflecting on the fact that as human beings, we have a real desperate urge, it seems, to make human beings better, to improve on us, to educate us better, to make us behave better, to tame our wildness, to tame our actual innate animalistic tendencies, that we're not allowed to be human. We're allowed to be a better version of always. And that really does come with an awful lot of downsides and struggles for us as a creature. Like we wouldn't ask a dog to behave like a cat. Some obviously, I'm sure there's some
Right.
strange people out there who literally train their dog to act like a cat. I'm sure there are, but you know what I mean. Like we don't ask a rat to be a bird or a bird to be an octopus. Like we don't do that. We allow them to be a bird and we watch them thrive as a bird and we try and do everything we can to make their life as naturally beautiful as a bird as we possibly can. We don't take that away from them and say you're terrible because you like to fly. Like
Right.
it makes no
Stop it.
sense. It's so strange. And I think the more we actually start to understand that human beings are human beings, we like to walk, run, climb, we're curious, we're open, we like to do different things, we like to physically touch stuff, most people will like to learn in a very kind of aesthetic way, so like physically doing things, moving, playing with stuff, manipulating objects, building stuff, creating things. Some children obviously want to be quite artistic. Some people love to read. Some people do love to be quiet and contemplative and spend lots of time in nature, relaxed and taking their time with things. Some people like to move fast and furious. Some people are warriors. Some people are like chilled by the campfire kind of people telling the stories. Like we all have different characteristics and natures and personalities, but ultimately we are all human beings. And we are all actually being forced to believe that we are wrong if any of our natural instincts go against what the social constructs are. So I guess in summary of this rant of an episode, is really trying to get you guys to understand that if you find yourself getting frustrated, getting bored, your kids are getting frustrated or getting bored, things don't feel very aligned, you're struggling to kind of get them to grasp concepts, you're wondering what's going on, maybe just sit and have a think about how many different senses are being engaged in the conversation you're having. Are there other senses that you could engage? Is there something else? Like, could you make it more visual? Could you make it more like sound based? So like my kids love a rhyme or a song. Sorry, we create songs for things sometimes to help them remember bits of routines or like concepts, etc. There's so many great things out there, but just try and see how else, like what other senses you might be able to stimulate in this situation, and just see what happens. It's not just movement, but all sorts of different things as well. Taste, touch, like physical movement, all of it counts. And so just take a moment, take a beat. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your kids if sitting down doing maths is torture. Like, there is nothing wrong with anybody. Just find another way, have a look at it, get a bit creative, try and come up with something else. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but just think if there's anything that could change. Because I know that from my perspective, sometimes it's really, really difficult to get into that headspace of doing, but ultimately it nearly always results in fantastic outcomes with much less stress and anger and frustration on all fronts, and more retention and enthusiasm to do it again. Like, so actually that's all we want, right? We want our kids enthusiastic and having fun, and we want to enjoy doing it too. And we matter as well. So if we are not happy, we're not enjoying it, that also matters as well. We have got to look at why, like, what is it about this that's bothering us? Even if our kids seem to be doing actually quite well with it, but we find it really arduous to do with them, that is worth looking at as well. Like, how can you make that better for you? Like, could you do with being able to get out and move your body before you sit down and do some work with them at the table? Like, what is it that would help you as well to cope and to regulate and to get through those more frustrating or difficult moments of your day? So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. Ashley, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up for the day?
I do have just something really random that I'll try to wrap up quickly. I guess it's not random. It is related. So you were talking about how the business culture, the employment culture honors like difference of opinions, leaders, self-starters. Like they don't want just, someone following. They're looking for a little bit of a challenge, someone who's thinking differently, thinking alternatively. And in an earlier episode, I know I had mentioned that there was this post that I couldn't find and have still struggled to find, but have since pieced the information together about some of the tech leaders and how they had an alternative schooling background. And so really quickly, I'll just tell you, obviously, Jeff Bezos, huge in the news right now with the wedding and everything, had a Montessori initial start to his schooling. And his mother actually would say that he was so focused on the activity that he was working on that the teachers would have to like physically pick up his chair to move him to the next activity. And one of her quotes said, Montessori taught him to be a self-starter. He'd get so absorbed in activities that we'd have to nudge him forward. So right there, like such an incredible person. Obviously, he's done a lot, created something that no one thought would work. And obviously, everyone was proven wrong. The Google co-founders both attended Montessori schools as children. And I know Larry Page specifically has credited Montessori with teaching him to think independently and follow curiosity, right? And that's all we're trying to do with these kids, right? We want them to be self-motivated, question what's going on in the world. And that's exactly what Larry Page said, that like different alternative schooling helped him do. Yeah. And even Mark Zuckerberg also attended a Montessori school early in his education. And obviously he has been incredibly independent, passionate, exploring things in a way no one had thought they needed. So it's just really interesting when you look at those kinds of things. These are people that are shaping the way our world is moving forward. And they didn't do it solely on a traditional schooling background. So I think that's important to note. Every little bit that you're doing differently is helping your children.
I think this is so fascinating. And I think so many entrepreneurs and incredible people out there have just had the most interesting backgrounds. It's definitely worth doing some reading up on this if you find yourself being curious about the kinds of minds that you're trying to create and the kind of people who you want them to become, like how you want them to grow into themselves, essentially. Because there are some really fascinating books out there. So I would definitely seriously consider having a little look into some of these incredible people, some of these different kind of mindsets and the people who've come up with these great methods in the past of philosophies maybe in how they educate children, because it's so important to be considering what kind of minds we're trying to create and what kind of attitudes we want them to have. And I think let's definitely embrace just being curious about this and being open to different ideas and allowing them to become such interesting human beings, so full of ideas and thoughts, and actually allowing them to recognize that being human and needing to move our bodies or needing to eat something or drink something or go pee, etc., does not make us bad. It doesn't make us lazy or whatever the thoughts may be. It literally just makes us human beings. And the more this is embraced, I think the more hope there is for future generations to actually really enjoy education and to really enjoy learning again, and to actually become, I mean, if you think about the problems that we could solve with a nation full of children who are actually engaged and excited and enjoying their day-to-day learning, instead of it feeling like a big slog that they're kind of being forced to go to. And again, I'm generalizing. I do appreciate there's an awful lot of kids out there who do enjoy schooling and do enjoy being there and do enjoy learning. I'm not saying that people in school are not going to be, but I certainly think that it's super important for us to be, I mean, so many conversations are being had in government, in big kind of education organizations, charities, etc., to try and encourage schools to be way more focused on this, to be more aware of children's experiences in school, and to help them to actually enjoy their learning and be more engaged with it. So this is not just me getting at schools. This is me saying that there's a lot of people out there who really think that there's a lot of change that needs to happen for us to be really raising those nations of thinkers and actors, people who actually do things and fix it. And so if you are feeling at all like you relate to this and want them to be thinking differently, then it's really worth asking yourself some serious questions about what social constructs are forcing you to feel bad or worry about them sitting down and learning in such a sort of structured way, and why that feels so important, and actually whether or not those opinions need to shift and change. And we're allowed to change our mind, we're allowed to change our beliefs and to see it differently, but that does take effort. So it's worth taking the time to do that. And yeah, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. It has come with a million interruptions, so you will enjoy the edited version of what is going
Polished
to hopefully
version.
not sound like utter chaos. I think we've had about 6 interruptions. My computer stopped recording and I had to restart and update it, and my kids have come in 3 times. So I'm just absolutely blown away that we have managed to actually finish this thing. And I'm going to go jump in a nice cold shower now. Simmer off and carry on with our day. So enjoy it, everybody, and we will see you again next week. As always, take care, guys. Bye.
You've been listening to the Big Home Ed Conversations podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Big Home Ed Podcast for updates. Next week, Kelly will be sharing all things about deregistering. So if you're new to home ed or you're thinking about deregistering, this is the episode you've been waiting for. See you then.